started. Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the IDPro Solving the IAM Skills Gap with CIDPRO Introductory Webinar. I'm Heather Vessant, the Executive Director and President of IDPro, and joining me primarily giving this webinar today is Kevin Strader, our head of the certification committee. Kevin, do you want to go to the next slide? I like to give a little bit of an introduction to IDPro as we kind of, before we go into what the CIDPRO certification is, in order to kind of put the certification in context of our larger organizational mission. So the IDPro mission is to globally foster ethics and excellence in the practice and profession of digital identity. For me, that means supporting the human beings, you guys, the identity practitioners that are out there trying to figure out what is the right technology to implement, what is the best way to implement it in your system, how to best implement it so you don't have to redo it, how it's going to work with all the interconnected parts that identity interconnects with, and really trying to help you as a practitioner be the best practitioner that you can be. And IDPro does that with 3 pillars. At the top, we have our vendor neutral learning materials, which is our body of knowledge. The body of knowledge is, if you think about it, it's kind of like the book knowledge associated with learning the foundational knowledge needed to be a great identity practitioner. It's vendor neutral, and it is volunteer written by IDPro professionals and IDPro members. The next pillar is our certification. And so if you think of the body of knowledge as like the book knowledge you need to learn to be a good identity practitioner, the certification is that badge or the verification that says, hey, I prove that I have the foundational knowledge needed to do great identity and access management solutions implementations. And so that is what we're going to focus on speaking about in this webinar today. And then last but certainly not least is our community, which we primarily have on our Slack channel. And we also have discounts so that you can make it more easy to join and meet with your peers in person. One of those that's coming up, we've got 2 conferences coming up in May, EIC in Berlin, and we have Identiverse in Las Vegas. EIC is the beginning of May, Identiverse is the end of May, and for both of those, for IDPro members, you have 25% off those. And really, this is an opportunity to really kind of connect and learn from your peers. So next slide. I think this is where I hand it over to you, Kevin. Let me just give a brief introduction to Kevin. So Kevin has been working on the CIDPRO certification from inception, and he is currently the head of the certification committee, which means that both he and I work very closely together to put together the candidate experience, to put together materials like this to be able to communicate what the certification is, and to also put together supporting materials so that you can be prepared in the best way possible to be able to know what you're getting into, to study for it, and to be able to, when you finally do take the exam, that you're best prepared so you can pass it. And so this webinar, Kevin's going to go into all the nitty-gritty details that folks ask me questions about, so that you know what you're getting into. So yeah, Kevin, you want to take it away from here?
Great, thanks very much, Heather, and really good to be with everybody today. So as Heather said, I chair the certification committee. I've been involved in the CIDPRO certification since it was an initial idea that we wanted to create something that would really help professionalize the identity practice. And so I'm going to talk you through what the exam is about, a bit about why we've done it, and then go down into some of the details of the certification itself. And please put some questions into the chat, and we'll have a question time at the end of the session. So first of all, we're just going to go through CIDPRO. Who are the target candidates? This is a really important element of CIDPRO. What's the breadth of the topics that we're covering? and then some approaches as to how you can prepare for the exam, and just a couple of testimonials at the end about people that and organisations that have been involved with the CIDPRO exam. So first of all, why are we doing this? As Heather's just said, IDPro is about professionalising the identity industry. We need to be able to create people coming into the industry to become future talent, to be able to develop their skills as a professional identity person, so that our organisations and our customers can benefit. To do this, a really important part is to create a credential that has relevance, that has meaning, that will really help recognise that expertise in identity, and to validate and support identity professionals. So why this certification and why are we doing it now? Well, IDPro is about helping identity professionals learn, share, and grow. By having this foundational certification program, we're really focusing on one of the core elements of the reason for IDPro existing. And it should be something that helps raise identity into being something that is a professional skill that sits alongside cybersecurity and a lot of other areas. But identity has its own set of core knowledge elements, things that you should know. It's a certain set of professional practices, and it's different from just general security. So we need to raise that up and help people be aware that identity has its own specialism. And the only way to really do that is to work across the industry. So what we've created is a rigorous and vendor neutral certification. Everything that's covered on the CIDPRO exam is relevant across the whole identity industry. So doesn't matter which vendor products you're working with, what area you're working with in identity, whether it's operational, whether it's designing solutions, it's relevant for everybody. And it works across all vendor solutions. So it's something that IDPro is uniquely placed to be able to create. And we think we've done a pretty good job of creating that through the first exam. And as I say, first exam, this is a foundational exam. This covers all of the core elements of identity. What it doesn't do is go into some of the specialized domains. So healthcare, for example, has some very specific requirements like HIPAA. Financial services, government, all have very specific identity requirements. We don't go into those in the foundational exam. Our plan is that we will build out a whole set of exams based on this, that this is the foundation, and then we will have specialized certifications following on to go into those deeper areas. And it will be followed by a badging program that covers all of the domains that we're addressing. So what are the benefits of the IDPro certification? Well, a whole range of benefits for the candidates. It's a professional development activity. It's something that you can take part in, get involved, work towards the certification so that you can represent yourself as an identity professional. That really helps with employability. It validates that you are an expert in identity, demonstrates that you really want to learn, and gives you some really good public recognition. But for the industry as a whole, it's really important that we have focused development paths for our employees. It's like a lot of organizations, people like Heather and myself talk to, want to be able to have development paths that help people become true validated identity professionals. And that's where CIDPRO comes in as a certification. It gives this real baseline of proficiency, and it gives credibility to customers, partners, vendors, that you know what you're doing in the identity space. And we've seen organizations coming along wanting to get whole teams certified because they want to show that they are true experts in the identity space. I've already mentioned it's vendor neutral, it's foundational, it's knowledge that everyone coming into the industry should have, whether it's new into the industry or transferring from another sector. But this is the foundational knowledge. And it also addresses some of the really key identity skill shortage areas. So we do touch on software development. We talk about a lot about implementation, architecture, things that not everybody has been fully aware of, but it's really key when you're working with identity solutions. So as a certified identity professional, it's designed for professionals who have ideally around 2 years experience. This was a key thing that we had in mind throughout the exam development process. As an identity professional, you need to gain some basic knowledge, but we actually want to know that you can put this into practice. So our target candidate is somebody with that 2 years-ish of experience, who wants to demonstrate they can expand their identity knowledge, get validation for what they've been doing in the identity world, and get credibility and enhance their own personal employability. So it's a really key qualification, but it's not for people that are starting their journey into identity. It is very much for people that have already started working with identity systems that now want to demonstrate that they have met the criteria for the certification. So, as I said, the exam is industry and sector agnostic, and it's vendor neutral. So the certification is designed for people who are working in or planning to work in a whole range of roles. And here's some of the examples that we used when we were building the exam. Could be for security architects, software engineers, identity administrators, consultants, or deep technical professionals, or into things like risk management and identity verification. So a wide range of application of the CIDPRO credential. So hopefully you feel like you fit into one of these categories, or this is your aspiration, is to work in one of these roles. But here are the list of target candidates for the CIDPRO credential. So that's a bit of background to CIDPRO, but what do we actually cover? So there are 5 main elements of the CIDPRO certification. The first are the basic elements of an identity solution. So things like IDPs, you need to know what the key elements are when you're building identity. So looking at all of those core components and identifying what their role is, how they work together, so that you know how an identity solution can be structured. Second objective goes much further down into specifics around what is an identity, what are identifiers, what is an identity life cycle, how do you do identity proofing. So these are core elements of any identity and access management solution. So we go a lot more into those to make sure that you understand the specifics of the identity domain. The third objective is what we call security for identity. This topic is very much around sort of where does identity fit in the overall infrastructure? So you need to have some basic knowledge of things like cryptography. You need to have a good understanding of where does identity relate to other systems? What are the key things you need to think about? But also things like, how do you make sure that the identity system is well protected? So checking on the essential cybersecurity, foundational network security elements as well. So really understanding where identity fits in that security landscape. Topic 4 is slightly different because it's about the rules and standards. There's some very obvious things like we're always going to be talking about things like SAML, OAuth, OIDC, a lot of things in there. But it also covers things like GDPR and the implementation of GDPR-like protocols in different states across the US. Lots of different countries have approaches to privacy. We also have things like data sovereignty. So where's data stored? What identity data is stored? Where is it stored? So really important to know some of these supporting rules and regulations around identity systems. And the final objective is very much based on operational considerations. What do you do when an identity system is running? If you have a call center and somebody calls in and asks to have their password reset, what are the risks? How do you make sure that you're not breaching the identity system by doing something that just will break the whole process? So very much operationalizing identity. And a lot of this comes from just being around and using identity systems and being aware of some of the vulnerabilities and risks around the use of identity. So those are the 5 high-level objectives. And as you can see, it's a pretty broad breadth of topics relating to identity and very little crossover with many of the other certifications in the industry that focus much more on core security, threat assessment, vulnerabilities. This is about identity, which is quite used. It's really operational, both inside and outside an organization with things like IAM. So deep focus on identity, but with an underpinning of security. Just want to talk briefly about the development process, because this is really important to how valid the exam is. We actually started the exam development with the body of knowledge. As Heather was saying in the introduction, the body of knowledge is the sort of core foundational asset of IDPro. It documents what is identity in all its different aspects. So the body of knowledge is absolutely key to this. But it's not suitable for an exam development project. So we went through a stage of what we call knowledge area abstractions. We've identified the key areas of knowledge across all the BOK articles. Based on that, we were then able to develop the exam blueprint, which is what we use to develop the question bank that you'll be experiencing when you take the CIDPRO exam. But one thing that comes out of that process is it identified some gaps. And we found that there were some gaps in the body of knowledge, and we've been able to create new articles to go into the BOK that then covered everything that's covered in the exam itself. But as the BOK itself is being updated and new topics are being added and the identity world moves forward, we will then use that to do the next update to the exam. So the body of knowledge will then drive the next development of the updated knowledge area abstractions and give us a new exam blueprint and so on. So we've deliberately and very intentionally set out to have an exam development process that will keep the exam current and will make sure that it can keep pace with the changes that take place in the identity world. And just a little bit here about how we actually wrote the exam itself. It actually takes quite a long time to develop a certification like this, because the first thing is we have to identify who are the experts in the industry who are able to generate questions that are meaningful. So we did some information sessions and recruited a number of item writers. The item writing team came from every aspect of the industry, from people that are involved in writing standards, end users, it came from organizations supplying identity solutions, from consultancies. So there's a real breadth of item writers that have been involved in this. So they went through some training and did the item writing, which took a couple of months to build the item bank. And then we went through a whole review process where every question's been reviewed. It's been checked to make sure that it's a fair question. We've had 2 lots of individuals going through the exam, answering the questions, which has then been analysed to make sure that they're fair questions. Anytime we found an issue, we've either reworked or removed the question. So it's gone through a full psychometric review. It's very fairly balanced. So key to this is there's no trick questions. They are just questions that have been written by industry experts on the topics that have been identified in the blueprint. So we're not setting out to try and catch anyone out. These are just very fair, valid questions. They may cover domains that you don't know about, but that's the whole part of doing a certification program, is to make sure that you've got a general understanding of all the key principles. So that's the process we went through. So how do you start preparing to take the CIDPRO exam? There was 3 stages to taking the exam successfully. The first stage is really to get the foundational knowledge. As Heather and I have both said, the body of knowledge is the key reference for the CIDPRO certification. It isn't the only reference, and I'll show you in a few slides some other places to go, but the body of knowledge is the foundation of the exam. There's a document that identifies which items in the body of knowledge you should have a look at. It's guidance, because what you then need is applied identity experience. And having the book knowledge is all very well, but until you can actually do identity in practice, we can't really assess if you're a good identity practitioner. So we're looking for people that have been able to apply their identity knowledge in multiple areas. Hopefully over 2 years, you've had enough experience working with identity in different domains that you'll be able to fully appreciate what goes on in the identity world. So you've got the foundational book knowledge, you've then got some application experience, and then you come into the exam preparation piece, which the first thing is we have some exam preparation support material, so the reference guide that we have, but we want to make sure that you're fully aware of the sources and the places we've gone to source questions from. But we also have a practice exam, and the practice exam is questions that have come out of the question pool that for various reasons we haven't used, usually because we've had too many questions written in a particular area. They're written by the same group of authors. They've gone through the same review process, but they were surplus to what we needed for the question bank itself. So we've put these together into 2 practice exams, which you can also get access to. So you've got 2 practice exams, asking different questions around the 5 objectives. If you're doing well with those, then you should be well set to take the full CIDPRO certification and receive this badge at the end of the process. So this really summarizes what I've just been saying. The process is knowledge. Review the body of knowledge, check out the guidance in the CIDPRO reference guide, and make sure you've learned about all the topics on the CIDPRO objectives. Then gain experience as a practitioner in one or more of the areas relevant to the certification. And then practice, review the objectives, make sure that you're aware of where you might have knowledge and experience gaps. And if you need to, go and get a bit more experience, go and study a bit more. to make sure that when you look at the objectives, you're really comfortable with everything we're going to ask about. And then finally, you should take the CIDPRO practice exam just to make sure that you're ready for the full assessment. And this is very much what I was looking at earlier, but foundational knowledge. This is the foundational knowledge. You'll find this in the guidance documents. You should be able to explain the basics elements of an identity solution, describe the identifiers, identity lifecycle, identity proofing, understand the fundamental concepts of security for identity, describe the rules and standards that relate to identity, and then explain the operational considerations of identity solutions. If you feel like you're ready with all of these and you have a really good understanding, then you've got the core knowledge that you need for the test. So where can you go for assistance? On the IDPro website, there's this box in the top right corner that's on the left-hand side of the slide that says CIDPRO. If you go to that, you'll find a number of items here. The first one tells you about the exam. And on the right-hand side here, I've got a sample from the objectives document, but this goes down into far more detail about what the objectives of the CIDPRO exam are covering. So I've talked about the high level, like objective one, explain the basic elements of an identity solution, but what do we mean by that? So in the objectives document, it tells you exactly what is it that we are looking for in the certification. So this is an absolutely central document that you should take a look at because it tells you exactly what are we going to test you on when you take the CIDPRO exam. The second thing I just want to reference is the reference resources. So on the bottom left, we've got a document that tells you all the other supporting documents that you should be aware of or had a read of. Some of these are really critical. The NIST special publication on digital identity guidelines, really fundamental to the whole identity domain. Absolutely really important to take a look through these guides. We have used them heavily in developing the exam alongside the body of knowledge. But there's also a number of other documents, and see there's a lot of federal documents we've referenced and some standards documents. So if you go to the reference resources, then you'll find the list of all the supporting documents that we were using when we went through the exam development process. We also have an FAQ on the CIDPRO menu, which is just general questions, many of which are topics that I'm covering on this webinar today. And we have a menu there for global exam support. So a lot of the questions about how do you register for the exam, how do you sign up for it, what does it cost, all those elements are there. Also, what do you need in order to set the test up on your own system? So when you're ready to take the CIDPRO certification, that global exam support is one of the pages that you should go to. So a lot of resources available on the IDPro website. We're constantly adding to these. We're building out new resources for Identifirst later next month. We're going to be adding some new resources. So keep coming back to this site because this is where you can get the best support for taking the IDPro certification. So finally, I just want to move on to a couple of testimonials. One example is corporate member of IDPro used the CIDPRO certification as a core for team building and helping people get recognition, particularly seniors, getting recognition for their identity professionalism. So it's very useful for seniors to get more recognition, new people into the organization, juniors getting more incentive to learn, but it's also a great tool as a corporate member for recruiting and retention, it's great to see people being recognised for their expertise. In many cases, it helps people stay with the organisation. It's often quoted as being one of the top reasons people leave is they don't get recognition for their expertise. Well, CIDPRO is a great way to get recognition that you are an identity practitioner and you are a specialist in this field. So really useful tool to use as part of corporate recruitment and retention programs. It's also very important for individuals, and one of our previous webinars we had Romain from Signal on the webinar. Romain said that it fills a significant gap in the professionalization of digital identity. So it's essential this discipline continues to increase within enterprise security. We need to raise the profile of identity as being a true independent specialism within the greater security domain. So great to see CIDPRO used in that way, and very much something that we'd like to promote and support people getting recognition for their own particular expertise. So Heather, I'd like to invite you back just talk about some of the offers.
Yes, and actually these are the ones from last month, and as you were talking, I just updated them with this month. So if I can take away your screen share, I will go ahead and share the April offers. So here we go. So we're going to offer another free sample exam. And what this does is this offer allows you to kind of get an experience of what is the certification exam like. And in order to activate that, to receive that, use the code practice free at the web assessor site. And if it is not working right this instant, give us a minute. And because we were just activating this. And then we're also going to be offering a 20% discount on a CIDPRO exam if you buy it. You need to purchase these offers. They're available for about a week. We'll give you till next Friday. And so you can also get a 20% discount on the CIDPRO exam, making it be $600 instead of the list price of $750. You will need to purchase the exam before May 5th. And when you purchase it, you have to schedule it. You can schedule it at some point in the future. You just need to be able to take it by the end of the year, December 31st. So, and I think with that, we can open it up to some Q&A. And I will see if there's questions or if you want to just raise your hand. Okay. Kevin Shika has a question.
Yep.
Could you explain the exam passing criteria and how many times one can take the exam?
So the I keep forgetting the pass mark is about 65%. It's based on the idea of being a minimally competent candidate. So the criteria is we're looking to make sure that everyone that's passing the exam has reached a minimal level in each of the core areas of the exam. There is a retake policy, so you can't take the exam for another 2 weeks before you have another attempt. Mainly because we'd like you to just review the report that tells you where you've done well, where you haven't done so well, go and do a little bit more development, and then be able to take the exam after that. So it's very standard approach to doing certification. We're not doing anything particularly complex with the approach. So I know some exams, particularly higher level professional certifications, try and do a lot of advanced sort of questioning based on individual responses. Ours is a very straightforward exam, and I'd say you meet the minimal competency criteria, and you'll successfully pass the exam.
Great, thanks. We just got a bunch more questions for you, Kevin. from Deval. Is there a validity period for the certificate after which it has to be renewed?
Okay, no, there isn't at the moment. So it's a foundational exam, and it's one of the principles is when you're doing foundational exam, we want to just give profile to the fact that you do know what identity is. There isn't really a lot of benefit of taking that away once you've achieved it. So different exams take different approaches. So if it's something that's very, very specific, you might want to have that exam updated on a regular basis and expire it. We're trying to build up a general level of expertise and recognition for identity. So we don't have a policy of expiring the exam. Once you've achieved it, you have achieved it. You don't need to come back and recertify for the exam. So the other part of the question.
I think that was it for this one. Is there a validity period that it needs to be renewed?
No.
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 We do have some more questions
Yeah.
from Jason Lim. What are the IAM domains that will be covered in CIDPRO? For example, IGA, PAM, Access Management, CIAM, CIAM.
Yes, all those above. They're all in the exam.
Great. And I would recommend that you look at the materials on the site. Here, I can show you. If you go to the CIDPRO and go to this global exam candidate support page, we link to the body of knowledge. We have a document that is our key terms. We also have the additional reference resources, which Kevin has a screenshot of, and then the detailed spreadsheet or the detailed outline is here. So just to kind of show you, this is terminology, so you can review it. These are our reference materials. These are reference materials that are not the body of knowledge. So if you review the body of knowledge, these reference materials and terminology, you'll be in a good place for, being able to take the exam. Okay, another question from Susan. How much time is allowed for the exam?
So it's 2 hours, and you have 100 questions in those 2 hours. So it's plenty of time for the questions. We've had, as I mentioned, they've all been assessed to make sure that it's possible to do 100 questions when you've got that 2 years minimal experience. So we're not setting you up for failure at all with this, but 100 questions in 2 hours is the time allowance.
Great. And here's a question from Leon Listen. The initiative to create IAM certification and fill these gaps are great. Another organization, the Identity Management Institute, created certification some years ago. Is it comparable? Can you compare between
Yes,
CIDPRO and the Identity Management Institute?
We're aware of that and what it was looking at when we were developing this. I think the one thing that we've tried to really focus on is identity practitioners. So this is really about identity from people that are using identity in real world scenarios. We're trying to be very practical, very much based on what do the vendors see every day, what do users see every day, what do partners see every day. This is based on real experience. I guess what we saw was it was quite theoretical in many respects. The Identity Institute, the Identity Management Institute one. We're basing this on the body of knowledge. The body of knowledge is real world experience of identity as a profession. So I think you'll see a fundamental difference in approach. We want to certify people who are true identity practitioners. I want to make sure that they can stand out in the industry.
I guess I would also make another comment the way I like to describe it is, if you think of the body of knowledge as the book knowledge, you need to have 2 or more years of experience. That's kind of like applying that book knowledge to real world scenarios. The test tests on real world scenarios. You can't read the book knowledge and be able to expect to pass the exam, because you need to know how to apply that knowledge. And so it's not theoretical. You do have to understand the theory, but you have to put it into practice. And that's what we want to focus on, putting it into practice. Test the certification certifies that you know how to do best practices in these scenarios, in the foundational identity scenarios. Okay, so Kevin, there's a question about passing 85 or 65%.
It's 65.
Okay.
65%.
Okay. Another question from Alex: is this exam taking a risk approach like CISSP, or more technical hands-on approach? Oh, I think I just answered that for you.
I was going to say you pretty much answered that, Heather. It's very much based on real world scenarios. That was the basis of exam development. It's the basis of BOC. IDPro as a whole, we're about identity as a practice, where it's practitioners, it's example scenarios that we've used for the exam. We want to recognize people that can really do identity, and give them validation that they are good practitioners in this space. So all the exams questions are either full example scenarios, or they're based on sections of a scenario. Actually, I've just seen a question just pop up. Real world scenarios are sometimes subjective, depending on how a company approaches identity. Yes, that's why we had many debates in the exam building process. Every question was reviewed multiple times by people from different perspectives. So there were people there who take very much a vendor view. There are people there that were very much taking it from sort of, I do identity this way, and other people doing it a different way. And we came to a consensus around each question. It took us a number of months to do that. But what we've got to is a common view that is across multiple organizations in every dimension of the identity practice, so that it should be very representative of what good practice is, rather than anyone's individual perspective. So it's quite easy to write questions when you're just taking one person's view on the world. And I say, I've been deeply involved in vendor certifications for many years. Vendor certifications are very positional. This is not. This is what does good look like, and we want to test you on that. Okay.
Great, thanks for that clarification.
Okay, let's skip a question.
Lots of great questions, everyone. I think that's one of the reasons why we continue to do this webinar, because we have a lot of interest, and folks want to know what they're getting into before they take it. Well, some folks do. Some folks will just jump straight in and take it cold. Yeah. We've got IDPro members that do that as well. So,
and I'm going to say the practice exam is one of the best things that we've got, because if you think you're ready to take the exam, go and try out the practice exam. Do a self-assessment with it and see where you think where you are in readiness for the CIDPRO exam. I know some people have a fear of exam taking. That's why we have the practice exam. You can go and try it out. There's 2 different papers. Just go and see where you are in respect to your knowledge of the identity world, and where your current level is. It's also a great way of highlighting key areas that you might want to focus on a bit more. So I know there's one objective, objective 4, that people might want to take more of a look at. It's because it's around GDPR, privacy, sovereignty, some of those topics. Not everyone's come in contact with those. They're still important topics when you're an identity practitioner. So it's really key to focus on some of those areas in the practice exam. It's a really good way to try and just see where you are and get an assessment, and then you know where to focus going forward. Okay, have we run out of questions, Heather?
We sure have, and that means we can conclude. I'm going to stop the recording.